Hello again, welcome to another edition of Shed Talk, my weekly magazine video series looking at the keeping, breeding and showing of cage birds with a particular focus as usual on the exhibition style budgerigar. Well, I think I mentioned it in the what I've got planned for August episode, and really it's getting the cages behind me cleaned and the stands done. So I think what we'll do in this episode is just, as I'm doing that, just talk through what it is and how I go about cleaning the cages in here. There's still a couple, of course, that I can't do. Well, one mainly, because the one in cage number 1 where I've still got the hen in there, just having a little rest, she can go back into the main flight probably tomorrow or the following day. But I still do have youngsters in cage number 6. We did have a very brief look at those at the very end of the last episode. So what I will do first of all is we're going to get those out of the nest box, and we'll get the nest box out. They haven't jumped the nest yet, which is a bit of a shame. We'll get those out and I'll just have a very quick look at them, you know, just in my hand as we normally do when they're in the nest box. Try and identify the colours and talk a little bit about what they might look like. And then following that, or whilst I'm doing that, I'll start cleaning up the cages in here, and I'll show you and talk a little bit about what my intentions are around that. Right, let's get those chicks out and we'll have a quick look at them. So here are the two birds then. One of them's very, very noisy, the normal green. We'll get them out and have a quick look at them. These are the last two, and I think you can probably see we've got keep hiding from me, so we've got another light green cinnamon opaline here. You can see the cinnamon in the wings. The cheek patches. And the cinnamon spots. Spots look like they're going to be quite big. I did mention in the last episode that spots on the opalines tend to be quite big. The ring's still nice and clean, which is good news. And around the vent is nice and clean, which is also good news. Not too much of a pecker, this one, although or a biter, although I spoke too soon. You can see the feet as well, that light coloured feet. So we're definitely an opaline, because you can probably see the opaline with the lack of dark markings on the back, although they've still got the bars across the head still at the moment. Hopefully it will lose most of those, and hopefully it won't have too much flecking. Doesn't look like it's going to at the moment. Opalines tend to be flecked a little bit more than the other bird, which over here in the UK is a major fault. It's quite narrow at the top of the head, don't you think? Right, let's pop him back in the box and we'll have a look at the other one, the noisy one, which I expect is going to start shouting at me. Oh, looks like the opaline's shouting at me now. So this is a normal, and again you can probably see the darkness of the wings, and I think it's a normal light green, yep. And again you can see the cheek patches of the normal. Spots, looks like it's going to have some reasonable sized spots, but they're not massive, are they? Not compared with the other one. But the ring again is relatively clean. There's a little bit around there that needs cleaning. Again, these have got old rings on them. I think I mentioned that. Rather than buying the new rings, these have got an old ring, same colour as this year, but leftover rings. Well, you know, mainly because these are never going to, given how young these are, they're never going to get out as onto the show bench, are they? Not as a young bird, anyway. Feet are slightly darker, the darker colour of the normal. And I don't know if you can see this, maybe when I pop him back in, but you can see the difference in tail length. very short tail on that and quite a longish tail on the opaline. So that ought to be coming out very soon. In fact, both of these birds I would think ought to be coming out. Just check around the vent. Again, reasonably clean around the vent. The nest box is still relatively clean. It was cleaned out a couple of days ago, I think, but they're keeping it reasonably tidy. This one did just give me a little nip, not massively. I would say this is going to be a cockbird. And again, the bars across the top of the head. He looks a little bit broader across the top of the head as well than the other one, doesn't he? So, and he's got some of those feathers coming down a little bit. Right. Pop him back in the box. And these two can go back to be fed. Like I say, I'm hoping these two will be out of the nest box relatively shortly. Finally decided to be quiet. You can probably see the tail there a little bit better. And one tail is much longer than the other. And you can also, I think, probably see the difference in the top of the head on the two birds here as well. You know, we've got the normal with quite a broad top of the head, and the opaline quite narrow across the top of the head. Like I say, I will now pop both of these back, or put the nest box back. And we'll discuss cleaning. So as I said, it's time to start giving the breeding cages in here in particular, but we'll talk a little bit about outside as well, a very good clean down. I'm not going to show you me scrubbing everything because that would just be silly. I'll just talk about what I will do. Now you will know that the drinkers, so they get washed daily anyway, so as I work my way around and top up, these get washed out in soapy water daily. At the end of the breeding season, what I will do is I will then sterilise all of the drinkers that I am using, and I sterilise those using some, and I think I've mentioned this before, but using the baby sterilising tablets for babies' bottles. I buy the cheapest ones, the one I get them again from Tesco, so some fairly cheapest ones, and I just pop these in with a sterilising tablet, and I just leave them overnight to sterilise. Now the good thing about that is that you don't need to use masses and masses of hot water, because they actually use cold water to sterilise. In fact, that's what it suggests. So I will sterilise all of the drinkers, and alongside that I will sterilise the feeding or the seed trays as well, so the seed dishes that are in there. So again, they will have been washed out, you know, once a week, and they got washed out when as I close each of the cages down. But I will sterilise those just in a bowl with the sterilising tablets in there, just to help get those clean and ready for the next breeding season. So that's just the utilities that are in there. So I suppose the dishes and drinkers that are in there. The little soft food trays, they will just get washed out as I normally do in some hot soapy water, and then stacked away. While I'm on the subject of the drinkers and using the baby tablets for the drinkers, I use the same thing. I keep going off camera, don't I? I do apologise for that. So some of you will know that I use I suppose it's an indoor watering can for houseplants in the shed, just to top the drinkers up. it means I've got a set quantity of water that I then can use to make sure I'm putting the right amount of supplement in. So whether that be, you know, the avian gold or calcium or whatever I'm using, I will place it into here, and I know how much I've got in there. So I will also do the same thing with this. So again, when that becomes empty, so as I've used up all the water in there, what I will do is top it up with normal clean water, and I will then put a sterilising tablet in there. There's one other thing I would say. So I found that the one area that does get quite grimy if you're not careful, and can end up becoming a little bit, the word I'm looking for, scaled, I suppose, is the spout area. So for the spout area, I've got a little wire brush that I pop down, or it's a little fiberglass brush. I pop down there and I just give it a quick scrub out with that wire brush. So that's, I just thought I'd mention that at the same time as I'm talking about the drinkers. So having spoken about the drinkers and the dishes and things, the next thing that is, I suppose, separate from the cage is the nest boxes. These really need, now I use wooden nest boxes, and I know, you know, lots of people will be using the plastic ones, and plastic ones would be easier to clean and all the rest of that. But for me, again, you know, on a budget, I use the wooden ones just because they were cheaper when I first got them. So I will continue to use them until the time comes that I will need to upgrade. And with them being the box in box type, I take them apart, and so they will initially just get washed out in warm soapy water. So I will just wash them completely, warm soapy water, make sure they're nice and clean, as clean as I can get them anyway, and then so they will then be left to dry. Following that, they will then get an overnight soak in a strong bleach solution. So I know some people will, you know, say that you need to be careful about using bleach, normal domestic bleach around the birds, but I know that a number of vets will just use bleach to clean their stuff down. So and I've never had a problem with using the bleach in them. So why do I use bleach? One, first of all, it makes sure that the nest boxes are nice and clean, and have been fully disinfected from anything that's in there, so it will kill all of the germs and things like that. The other thing it will do is it will start to kill off any mite that are in there, particularly if you're soaking them overnight in the bleach solution. So if there was any, you know, chance of any mite getting into the wooden nest boxes, then the bleach will kill them. So after that overnight soak, they're again left to dry naturally, so they won't get washed out again. I won't, you know, rinse off any of the bleach. They'll just get left to dry naturally. And then what I will do is I will then spray them completely with a poultry shield. Now, those of you that saw me when I was cleaning out a little while ago, I cleaned out the big flight where the main budgerigar fight is now. That used to hold the finches, and when I was transferring, moving that to hold the budgerigars, I cleaned that out, and I used this here, which is it's called Poultry Shield. So it's obviously designed for those people that keep chickens and other types of poultry. You dilute it down with water, and you just can use it like that to scrub it onto them, or you can, what I do with the boxes is I spray it. Now, with this, it does say that you will then need to make sure that you then rewash it afterwards. So after I've sprayed it all down with the antimite, what I do though is I tend to just leave it for a good couple of days, and then I will just rinse the box out. I've never had a problem with that. So whilst it talks about, you know, leaving it for 4 hours and then washing it down with clean water, I leave it overnight after I've sprayed it, and then I just give the boxes a rinse. And again, after I've rinsed the boxes, they're then left to dry naturally. And following on from the drying process, the final thing that will happen with the nest boxes is I will get some, I think it's called diatomaceous earth. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure I've pronounced that wrong. So it's just a powder, it's like a talcum powder, I suppose. I think it's actually made up, or it's the same thing that makes up talcum powder. And I will then dust all of the nest boxes, making sure I get into the crevices with this. And this again will tend to kill mites, or stop mites from reappearing as well in the nest boxes when they're left into storage. So that is how I go about cleaning the nest boxes after they've been used for a full breeding season. So this brings me on to the cages then, and with them being all wire cages, I think it does help in terms of keeping them clean. So they're all wire cages and they've got plastic trays, which means, generally speaking, there is much less chance of there being red mite in the all wire cages, just because there's less places for the red mite to hide overnight. So, you know, that's one of the, I suppose, the better things about the wire cages. The other thing is, of course, is that, you know, it does make cleaning easier, and I don't have to worry too much about painting them afterwards. So, you know, they are just washed, cleaned, disinfected, and then they're ready to go. So when they're in general use, again, once a week the cages will get a clean, and the trays get so they're covered, you know, they've got paper in the bottom of them, so that stops most of the problems. But there's always stuff that soaks through the paper, or where the paper isn't quite covering. So I do need to scrape the trays away with just my normal scraper that I use, and then following that they then get sprayed with a disinfectant. I tend to use for those an avian disinfectant, just because it's getting used every day. So I use just a general avian disinfectant on those, and I just spray them and then just wipe it and then leave it to remain on there, I hope that will, you know, help keep them nice and clean. But when it comes to the end of the breeding season, so the cages will be stripped down, the perches will get washed in hot soapy water, similar to the nest boxes, similar to the shrinkers. The perches will get washed in hot soapy water. They are plastic perches, so again it means it's easier for me to clean them. And then they get soaked in a bleach solution to make sure that they are thoroughly clean, and they will get left to soak in a bleach solution again for 24 hours. Following that, they'll be left to just dry naturally, and then they will be sealed and put away, until I need them for the next breeding season. So that's the perches. The bottom trays, I've spoken about my daily routine with the bottom trays. The end of the breeding season, these will get thoroughly scrubbed with hot soapy water, and then I will place a bleach solution in the bottom of the trays, and again 24 hours. I leave it overnight just to make sure it is thoroughly clean, and then I will then scrub that out with a cloth, and then empty them away, and then again they will get left to dry naturally. So that's the trays. The cages, I think I showed this a little while ago. I take them outside and they get scrubbed with a brush, a stiff brush, to make sure there's no fouling left anywhere. I get into the corners to make sure they're all nice and clean. They're being scrubbed with a bleach solution. Make sure you're wearing gloves if you're doing that. So a bleach solution, just to make sure again that they're all nice and clean, and then they're left outside to dry overnight. Now, of course, you need to have a day when it's nice, going to be fine if you're going to do that. Following that, they will get put back onto their racks where they are at the moment. Whilst they're outside though, I need to clean the wooden racking down. The wooden racking is another place where there is an opportunity for mite to get in. So what I will do there is I will wash it down with a bleach solution, like using lots of bleach at the end of the breeding season. Wash it down with a bleach solution, leave it to dry naturally. I will then spray it with the poultry guard spray again on those. Again, I will leave that to dry naturally, and what I will then do is use some of the mite powder that I showed you earlier, and I will get into all the nooks and crannies of the wooden shelving, just to make sure that, again, there's nowhere for the mite to hide. Now I have not seen mite in my setup, either in here or outside, in the outside flight. So touch wood, you know, I've not seen it, any sign of it. So I'm hoping that that means we're okay. You know, so, but this is just a precaution. You know, better to, you know, to prevent it rather than have to deal with mite should it appear in the shed. And so touch wood at the moment, I've not seen any sign of mite whilst I've been following this routine. So that's my routine at the end of the breeding season and how I get everything nice and clean. Well, I was hoping that we could pop outside and I could talk about the my plans out there in terms of cleaning the breeding cages that the fives have been in. Unfortunately, the only time I've got to record is now, and it is absolutely pouring down out there. And as those of you that regularly watch know, there isn't a lot of room out there, and the camera would have got wet because it would have to be in place just outside of the door. Anyway, I have got some pictures of from out there, so we will look at those while I talk about it. So you will know I've got 4 breeding cages out there for the fives, of which 3 are in use, holding the 2 birds from round 1 of the cage number 1, which you can see here. Hopefully you'll be able to see a quick video of them and notice that their training cage for showing is on the outside of that cage, and you may spot at some stage that one of the birds pops in and out of it. Anyway, so that we've got that cage there. The cage below it is holding the second 2 birds I got that round the wrong way. Sorry, the top cage is holding the 2 birds from their second round. The bottom cage is holding the middle cage is holding the 2 birds from round 1, and then we've got a separate cage holding the 2 birds from round 1 of cage number 2, and that leaves me with a spare cage. So the plan is to move one at a time, to move the birds into the spare cage, clean a cage, and then rotate them round. I hope that makes sense. So they'll just rotate through whichever the spare cage is. It does mean that I am using cages that have been cleaned, but they do need cleaning out at this stage. Once I put the fives into the main flight for the winter period, so after I finish showing them, I'm hoping to get them out to 1 show at the end of the year. So once I've done that, prior to next year's breeding, starting around April, May time, I will give them another thorough disinfection. So that's my plan for the 5 cages out there, which of course is going to take a little bit of juggling, as I say, a little bit of juggling around to get those sorted out. The other thing I need to do is the cages that I'm going to use, or hopefully going to use, for the zebras, when I eventually get them, I need to give those a good clean as well and sort out where those are going to go. I have an idea, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a future episode. So that's really the cleaning that's going on in here. I'm sorry there wasn't a lot of look at the birds, but we all have to get the end of the breeding season sorted out, don't we? And the process that we go through at the end of that, in order to make sure everything is clean and ready to go for the following year. Right, that's the 5 sorts spoken about. Well, that does bring us to the end of another episode. As I said, I do apologise that there weren't too many looks at the birds. We did have a look at the 2 youngsters in cage number 6 right at the very beginning. I'm pleased to say that since we looked at those, one of them, the normal green, has actually left the nest box and is sat currently on the bottom of that cage. So I'm hoping the opaline will be leaving fairly soon. The other thing over the last couple of weeks, I suppose, the noise in the shed has just gone up and up and up, and every single bird seems to be full of life and full of chatter. I've seen a couple of birds in the main flight that look like they're, would like to go down, go to nest. The young birds behind me are all in very, very vocal voices, and again, very, very active. And my own view, and it is just my view, is that is a sign of a healthy shed. If there's plenty of noise going on in the shed, then it's a sign that the birds are healthy and generally, as best as I can say, enjoying. I know we're putting human traits on the birds, but are in good spirits, shall we say. Anyway, as I say that, it suddenly goes quiet in here, doesn't it? Right, but yeah, so the birds do seem to be in excellent voice. So what have we got coming up in the next episode? Well, in the next episode, we're going to have a look at the birds behind me. So the youngest of the young birds, we will get those out and we'll pop them into the show cages, and we'll have a quick look at those and see how those final few birds are doing. We might leave the 4 that we looked at in the last episode, I think it was. We might leave those because they're still, not a lot would have, well, it's been 2 weeks, so a bit would have changed, but they won't have changed dramatically since the last time we looked at them. So we'll get those out and we'll have a look and see how those are doing. As per the last episode, when we looked at them in the last episode, a couple of episodes ago, we will try and get them into family groups so we can see whether there's any particular nest that looks really, really nice. But that is for a future episode. Until then, as always, do stay safe, enjoy your birds.